It happened so fast that my brain couldn't keep up with my eyes. One moment, my daughter Lily was laughing on our porch, tapping her fingers against her wheelchair armrest to the rhythm of a song only she could hear. The next, a sharp metallic crack split the air, followed by her scream. I dropped the coffee mug in my hand, and time just broke. The sound of it hitting the concrete barely registered because all I could see was her, Karen Lancaster, our HOA president, standing over my daughter with a hammer still raised in her shaking hand. "Are you insane?" I shouted, sprinting forward. Lily was on the ground, blood trickling from her temple, her small hands trembling as she tried to move. Karen's voice came out cold, steady, horrifyingly calm. She was making too much noise, she said, like she was scolding a dog, not explaining why she'd struck a child. My legs buckled for a second. I couldn't comprehend what I was hearing. The whole street was silent, neighbors peeking through curtains, no one stepping out. I could hear Lily crying, the tiny sound of her whimpers slicing through my chest like glass. I knelt beside her, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I checked her breathing, whispering, "It's okay, baby, Daddy's here." My heart was pounding so hard it felt like thunder in my ears. Karen backed away, muttering something about rules and disturbances. I could barely see straight through the rage. I wanted to grab her, to scream, to make her understand what she'd done, but I couldn't leave Lily's side. When the sirens finally wailed in the distance, it was like air flooding back into my lungs. I looked up at the woman who had just shattered my world and thought, "You picked the wrong family to destroy." Before that day, I used to think Maplewood Estates was the kind of neighborhood people dreamed of: neatly cut lawns, identical mailboxes, smiling neighbors who waved as they jogged past in the mornings. We'd moved there 4 years earlier, after Lily's condition made it hard to navigate our old house's narrow hallways. This place had ramps, wide sidewalks, and a quiet that promised peace. My wife, Emily, loved how close it was to the community park, and I loved the idea that Lily could finally have a normal childhood, something close to safe, stable, ordinary. But ordinary never lasts when someone like Karen Lancaster decides you don't belong. Our house sat right across from hers, a mirror image painted in softer tones, with hanging flower baskets and a little wind chime that sang whenever the breeze passed through. I used to like that sound. Now it haunts me. Karen had been friendly at first, overly so. She brought us cookies when we first moved in, complimented Lily's bravery, and made comments like, "It's so nice you people try to keep her active." The words stung, but I let them slide. I thought she just didn't know better. I thought most people were good, deep down. Lily, on the other hand, had this light in her that refused to dim. She loved the smell of cut grass, the warmth of the sun on her face, the way her therapy dog, Max, barked when she laughed. She would spend hours on our front porch, drawing flowers in chalk on the ramp or humming Disney songs off-key. Every evening, Emily would sit beside her, knitting while I grilled dinner on the porch. It was the life I had fought for, the kind you build after years of chaos. Then came the first note. Slipped under our door in a crisp white envelope: "Please be mindful of noise levels. The HOA has received complaints." There was no signature, but the neat cursive and lavender perfume made it obvious who had written it. Emily tried to shrug it off, but I saw the worry in her eyes. "She's just being Karen," she said with a forced laugh. "Let's not give her attention." But that was the start. The complaints kept coming. Lily's wheelchair left marks on the sidewalk, her therapy sessions were too loud, even her wind chimes disturbed the neighborhood aesthetic. It felt like living next to a ticking bomb disguised as a neighbor. Every time I tried to reason with Karen, she smiled that tight, condescending smile. "I'm just following the rules, Mr. Collins. If we make exceptions for one family, we'd have to do it for everyone." What she never understood, or refused to, was that Lily wasn't noise. She was life. She was resilience made flesh. Every giggle, every sound that came from her meant she was still fighting, still living. But to Karen, those sounds were an inconvenience to her perfect world. And the more she felt disturbed, the more she made us pay for daring to exist differently. I remember one night Emily whispered, "She's not just cruel. She's obsessed." I didn't want to believe that, but deep down, I knew she was right. Karen didn't just want control, she wanted power. And in neighborhoods like ours, power wears a polite smile and wields a clipboard. We just didn't know yet how far she'd go to enforce her idea of quiet. The first real sign of who Karen Lancaster truly was came one warm Tuesday evening in late spring. I was on the front lawn watering the flower beds while Lily practiced guiding her wheelchair down the ramp with her physical therapist. The air smelled like lilacs and sunscreen, and I remember thinking how normal everything felt for once. Then I heard the click of heels against the sidewalk. Karen's voice, sweet but sharp, cut through the hum of the sprinkler. "Good afternoon, Mr. Collins," she said, adjusting her wide-brimmed sun hat. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I've been meaning to discuss a few concerns regarding your property." I turned off the hose, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Sure, what's wrong?" She clasped her HOA binder to her chest like a weapon. "Well, first of all," she began, "the ramp you built last year, it's technically not uniform with the neighborhood guidelines. It extends 2 inches beyond the permitted boundary. I'm afraid it's a violation." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "That ramp is for my daughter's wheelchair. You approved it yourself when we moved in." Karen gave a little shrug, her lips tightening. "The board re-evaluated the design. Some neighbors feel it's a bit industrial. Not exactly in keeping with the colonial aesthetic." Her words made my stomach twist. Before I could answer, Lily wheeled herself forward and said, softly, "Hi, Miss Karen." Karen froze for half a second, then leaned down just enough to look Lily in the eye. "Hello, dear. I can hear you all the way from my kitchen when you practice. You must be having so much fun making all that noise." Her tone was honeyed, but her eyes were ice. Lily's smile faltered, confusion clouding her face. I stepped between them. "She's doing therapy. She needs it." Karen chuckled, a quick, dismissive sound. "Of course. I just hope the rest of us can still enjoy our peace and quiet." She tapped her binder and added, "Please make sure her sessions don't go past 6 p.m. HOA guidelines, you understand." That was the first time I felt it, the shift in her. The politeness was gone, replaced by something sharper. She began showing up more often after that, measuring our lawn with a little tape measure, taking photos of Lily's ramp, pretending to inspect the mailboxes. She'd wave cheerfully when she caught me looking, her smile as fake as the flowers in her window box. A week later, she slipped another note under our door: "Noise carries farther at night. Please be respectful of neighbors' rest." Emily tore it in half. "She's baiting us," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "She wants a reaction." I nodded, but deep down I knew this was only the beginning. Karen didn't want a reaction, she wanted control. And little by little, she was tightening her grip on everyone who lived within her perfect, silent kingdom. The harassment started quietly, the way most cruelty does in perfect neighborhoods, small, deniable acts that grew sharper by the day. At first, it was the letters. Karen began printing them instead of handwriting them, as if that somehow made her accusations official. Each one was sealed with the HOA logo and a signature that looked suspiciously like her own. Violation: noise disturbance reported at 5:32 p.m. Please monitor your child's activity. A week later, unauthorized medical equipment visible from the street. I stared at that one for a long time, my jaw tightening. She meant Lily's wheelchair. Then came the fines. $50 for unsightly ramp paint. $75 for prolonged outdoor noise. It didn't matter that none of it was real, the other board members signed off without question, too afraid of crossing her. She ruled that neighborhood like a petty dictator with a rulebook in one hand and gossip in the other. Every time I tried to reason with her, she'd hide behind her smile. "It's nothing personal, Mr. Collins," she'd say sweetly. "We just want to maintain community standards." But it was personal. Everything about it was aimed at breaking us down, one notice, one whisper at a time. I noticed how neighbors who used to wave started crossing the street instead. How their kids stopped coming over to draw chalk with Lily. One afternoon, I overheard Mrs. Patterson mutter to her husband, "It's sad, but those people bring trouble." Those people. It hit me harder than I expected. Lily felt it, too. She stopped singing on the porch. She started asking questions I didn't know how to answer. Why doesn't Miss Karen like me? Why don't the other kids talk to me anymore? I'd tell her that some people just don't understand kindness. But inside, it killed me. Emily tried to stay strong, but I caught her crying more often, silent tears at the kitchen sink, pretending to be chopping onions. Karen's harassment escalated from paper to presents. She began walking her dog right up to our fence, letting it bark at Lily's therapy sessions. She'd film with her phone, claiming she was documenting rule violations. One day, I came home to find a bright orange notice stapled to our door: "Final warning, excessive disturbance." No explanation. Just a date, her signature, and a thinly veiled threat: "Continued violations may result in HOA legal action." That night, Emily begged me to move. "She's never going to stop, Mark. This woman, she's dangerous." But we couldn't afford to start over again. Everything we'd built, Lily's therapy setup, her doctors nearby, was here. I promised I'd handle it. I even filed a complaint with the county office, but nothing came of it. They said it was a civil matter. A few nights later, around midnight, I woke to a noise outside. I pulled the curtain back just enough to see the glow of a flashlight sweeping across our porch. Karen. She was taking pictures of the ramp again. My blood ran cold. I stepped outside, barefoot on the pavement, and said, "You have 5 seconds to get off my property." Her smile didn't waver. "I'm ensuring compliance," she said, her tone almost cheerful. "We can't have exceptions, even for special cases." That phrase, "special cases," hit like a slap. I stood there watching her walk away, her little clipboard swinging at her side, her dog trotting beside her. And in that moment, I realized something chilling: Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was obsessed with erasing anything that made her world imperfect. And my daughter's laughter, the purest sound in that entire neighborhood, was the thing she hated most. It was a bright Saturday morning, the kind that smelled like cut grass and promise. Lily was outside on the porch ramp, painting tiny blue flowers on the railing with her new set of non-toxic paints. The sun lit up her hair like gold. Emily was tending to the roses, humming along to the radio, and for a few brief minutes, peace actually felt possible again. I remember thinking, maybe Karen finally got bored of tormenting us. But peace in our neighborhood was always the quiet before the storm. I was in the garage sorting through some old tools when I heard Karen's voice slice through the calm. "You people don't know when to stop, do you?" Her tone was cold, sharp, carrying the kind of venom that made my spine stiffen. I stepped out and saw her standing at the edge of our yard, clutching a clipboard in one hand and, God help me, a hammer in the other. Her dog barked beside her, straining against its leash. Lily froze mid-brushstroke. Emily looked up, confusion turning to alarm. "Karen," I said, walking toward her slowly, "we've been over this. She's not breaking any rules. She's just disturbing the neighborhood again," she snapped, her face flushing red. "Do you know how many people have complained about the noise? That ramp squeaks, that child's voice carries, and that dog, oh, that dog barks at all hours." Emily's hands clenched at her sides. "She's a child, Karen. A little girl doing her therapy in her own yard. Karen's smile was twisted, almost trembling. Then maybe she should do it somewhere else. Lily's small voice broke the air. I'm sorry, Miss Karen. I'll be quiet. That should have ended it. But it didn't. Something in Karen's eyes snapped, like all her fake politeness burned away, leaving only the ugly truth underneath. She took a step forward, pointing the hammer toward the ramp. I told you this thing is an eyesore. It's ruining our property values. Don't you touch that ramp, I warned, stepping between them. Karen sneered. You think you can intimidate me? I'm the HOA president. I make the rules here. And before I could even process it, she swung. It wasn't a hard swing at first, more like she was trying to make a point, hitting the edge of the railing. But Lily startled at the noise and flinched backward, losing her grip on the wheelchair handle. The second swing came fast, wild, uncontrolled. I heard the metallic clang and then a scream so raw it ripped through my chest. Lily was on the ground, her paintbrush rolling away, blue paint smearing the concrete like spilled tears. Emily ran to her, screaming, Lily. I grabbed the hammer out of Karen's hand before she could swing again. What the hell did you do? I shouted. Karen's face twisted into something monstrous. She moved. She startled me. Neighbors began to peek through curtains, a few stepping out but keeping their distance. Nobody moved to help. Nobody called out. It was like the entire street had turned to stone. Emily cradled Lily in her arms, blood streaking down the side of our daughter's face where the metal had grazed her. Her little fingers trembled as she whispered, Daddy, I can't feel my back. My stomach dropped. Call 911. I yelled, fumbling for my phone. Karen stood there panting, muttering, it was an accident. She shouldn't have been there. She scared me. The sound of sirens began to rise in the distance, that eerie Doppler wail growing louder. I knelt beside Lily, pressing my shaking hands against her shoulder, whispering over and over, it's okay, baby. Daddy's here. You're safe. You're safe. Emily sobbed uncontrollably, rocking her back and forth as the neighbors watched from their porches like we were a TV show instead of real people bleeding in front of them. When the ambulance pulled up, the flashing red lights painted the street like a crime scene. Officers followed close behind. One of them, a young cop with uncertainty in his eyes, spoke gently, Sir, please step back. They loaded Lily onto a stretcher, her tiny body limp, her hands still smeared with blue paint. Karen tried to play innocent. Officer, this is all a misunderstanding. I was fixing my mailbox. The girl startled me, mailbox? I barked. She was painting flowers, you lunatic. The cop glanced between us, unsure. But then he looked down at the hammer still lying near the ramp, the paint splattered across it, and the expression on my daughter's face. His jaw tightened. Ma'am, he said slowly, we're going to need you to come with us for questioning. Karen's face went pale. I'm the HOA president, she snapped, as if that title could erase what she'd done. As the ambulance doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of Lily's face through the window, pale, frightened, but still breathing. My whole world was inside that van. I stood in the flashing lights, drenched in adrenaline, rage, and disbelief, staring at the woman who had just shattered everything I loved. And in that moment, I swore on everything I had left, she wouldn't get away with this. Not this time. The hospital lights were blindingly white, humming faintly above us like a reminder that the world hadn't stopped, even though mine had. The air smelled of antiseptic and fear. I sat in the waiting room, elbows on my knees, hands trembling, staring at a smear of blue paint still stuck under my fingernails. Lily's paint. I'd tried to wash it off in the sink, but it clung stubbornly, just like the image of her lying motionless on that ramp. Emily sat beside me, face pale and swollen from crying. Every few minutes, she'd whisper, she's strong. "She'll be okay," like saying it enough times could make it true. When the doctor finally emerged, his expression told me everything before he said a word. "Your daughter sustained a spinal injury," he began carefully, his voice too calm for what he was about to say. "We've stabilized her, but there's swelling near the lower vertebrae. We don't yet know the extent of the damage." My stomach clenched. "You mean," he hesitated. "She may not regain full movement in her legs?" "It's too early to say." Emily broke down completely then, her sobs echoing through the hallway. I stood frozen, gripping the edge of the chair like it could anchor me to reality. My throat burned, but no sound came out. I wanted to scream, to break something, to reverse time. Instead, all I could manage was a whisper, "She's 8 years old. She was painting flowers. They let us see her after a while. She looked so small in that bed, tubes running from her arms, a brace around her neck, the rhythmic beep of machines filling the silence that used to belong to her laughter." Her eyes fluttered open for a moment when we walked in. "Daddy, am I in trouble?" she whispered weakly. I felt my chest crack open. "No, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "You're perfect. You didn't do anything wrong." Emily kissed her forehead, tears dripping onto the white sheets. Outside the room, Karen's name echoed in my mind like a curse. The police report. The witnesses. The accident. I called the station, demanding updates, but the officer's tone was careful, distant. "She's claiming self-defense, sir. Says the girl startled her while she was doing maintenance." I nearly dropped the phone. "Maintenance? She had a hammer." He sighed. "It'll take time to sort out. There's no video footage, and the neighbors aren't talking." That last part hurt the most. The neighbors. The same people who'd borrowed our tools, eaten at our barbecues, watched Lily grow up. Not one had come to the hospital. Not one had called. The silence of that entire neighborhood was louder than any scream. That night, as Emily slept in the chair beside Lily's bed, I stood by the window and stared at the city lights flickering below. My reflection looked like someone else, hollow-eyed, jaw clenched, broken. I pressed my palm against the cold glass and whispered to the darkness, "You're not getting away with this, Karen." But the truth was, in that moment, I didn't know how to fight back. All I knew was that my little girl's life would never be the same, and neither would mine. 3 days passed before the numbness turned into something else, something sharp, alive, and burning. I hadn't slept. The hospital coffee tasted like ash, but it kept me awake long enough to think, to remember, to connect things. The police hadn't called. Karen hadn't been arrested. Instead, her lawyer had released a statement to the HOA Facebook group claiming it was a tragic misunderstanding. I saw it on my phone at 2 a.m., my hands shaking as I read, "Our president deeply regrets the accident involving the Collins child. She has cooperated fully and hopes for the family's understanding during this difficult time." Understanding. That word felt like gasoline on fire. By the next morning, I was done waiting for justice to arrive. I went home alone to grab fresh clothes, but what I found instead changed everything. Our mailbox was overflowing with letters, most of them unsigned. One envelope, though, caught my eye, HOA letterhead, same lavender scent Karen always used. Inside was a printed, incident summary, supposedly from the HOA Safety Committee. It read, "Child rolled unexpectedly into the path of an ongoing maintenance activity. No intentional harm observed." My jaw clenched. Maintenance activity meant my daughter's blood on the sidewalk. And the signatures at the bottom, 3 board members, looked eerily identical. Forged. I'd seen enough fake paperwork in my old days as an investigator to know the difference between ink and deceit. That's when I remembered the doorbell camera. I'd installed it last year after Karen's late-night inspections. I pulled up the footage on my laptop, scrolling through the day of the attack. The timestamp flickered, and there it was. Karen, crossing onto our property, hammer in hand, yelling before she even reached the ramp. Then the swing. The hit. The fall. My stomach turned watching it, but my hands didn't shake anymore. They were steady, deliberate. I saved the clip in 3 different formats, uploaded it to the cloud, and sent a copy to my old friend Detective Ramirez. Within an hour, he called back. "Jesus, Mark, you weren't exaggerating. That's assault with a deadly weapon." His tone hardened. "Why didn't the responding officer see this?" I exhaled slowly. "Because Karen is the HOA president. She's friends with half the precinct through donations and community events. She's been using that title as a shield." That was the moment the helplessness inside me snapped. The fear, the grief, it all condensed into something cold and focused. I wasn't just a broken father anymore. I was a man with evidence, connections, and nothing left to lose. When I returned to the hospital that night, I told Emily everything. She looked at me, her eyes swollen but fierce. "So what now?" she asked quietly. I held up my phone, showing her the video thumbnail, Karen frozen mid-swing. "Now," I said, "we make her watch her empire burn. One rule, one lie, one neighbor at a time." That was the spark, the moment Karen's power began to unravel. She thought she'd silenced us. She didn't realize she'd just handed me the weapon I needed to destroy her. I turned grief into a dossier. For the first time since Lily's hospital bed hummed, the old investigator in me took over and I started methodically. I scanned every HOA notice and matched dates to incidents, circling the lavender scent and the signatures that smelled like forgery. I pulled county property records, dug through meeting minutes, and found patterns, donations timed before lenient board votes, a few familiar names that always sided with Karen. I saved every digital copy in 3 places, backed up to the cloud, and labeled everything so nothing could be dismissed as panic. Detective Ramirez was my first ally. I sent him the doorbell footage and the photos of the hammer with blue paint on its head. He called back in under an hour, voice low. "We'll need sworn statements," he said. "And we'll need to corroborate timelines." He couldn't promise arrests overnight, but he did promise to quietly nudge the right channels. His involvement changed the pitch of the work from frantic to professional. I started gathering witnesses the old way, low pressure, high care. I knocked on doors, but I came with coffee and the frame of a man asking for help, not a man demanding revenge. People remembered small things. Mrs. Patel saw Karen measuring our ramp at night. Mr. Haynes had footage from his porch camera showing Karen pacing the sidewalk earlier that week. A teenager confessed she'd received a text from an anonymous HOA account mocking Lily's antics. Some neighbors turned away, terrified of HOA retribution. Others, ashamed, agreed to give statements but only if I promised anonymity at first. I assembled Lily's medical records in a meticulous timeline: ambulance call time, AR intake, CT scans, the doctor's note about spinal swelling. Each stamped page synchronized with the doorbell clip, and together they made the story unambiguous. I found a careless scrap in Karen's trash, crudely burned coffee grounds and a list of complaints that matched anonymous letters with the same handwriting quirks. My civil attorney helped authenticate those documents and prepare subpoenas. We also played the media card carefully. Ramirez advised restraint, no sensational posts, no martyrdom. Instead, I fed the local reporter corroborated facts, copies of official records, and the video clip with a strict embargo until we had legal cover. The goal was to unspool Karen's influence without giving her room to gaslight the neighborhood. Night after night I returned to the hospital, added another folder to the stack, and felt the paralysis of shock give way to a steady, purposeful rhythm. What started as a father's rage had become a professional case: evidence, witnesses, expert testimony. I wasn't searching for revenge in the petty sense, I was building an airtight path to accountability. If Karen thought a title and a clipboard made her untouchable, she hadn't counted on a father who knew how to collect the truth, and wouldn't stop until she paid for what she did. Every document, every sworn statement, every time-stamped file tightened the net. We were ready to pull it shut. The HOA meeting that night felt like walking into enemy territory. Rows of folding chairs filled the clubhouse, neighbors murmuring as I stepped through the door, holding a black binder pressed against my chest. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and tension. At the front sat Karen, perfectly composed in her yellow blazer, lips curved in that familiar tight smile. "Ah, Mr. Collins," she said into the microphone, voice dripping with condescension. "Glad you could join us. We were just discussing community conduct." I didn't sit. "Good," I said evenly. "Because that's exactly what I came to talk about." The room went quiet. I opened my binder and placed my phone beside it, its screen glowing faintly. "You've all heard her version of what happened," I continued, "but you haven't seen the truth." I tapped the screen, and the video began to play on the projector, footage from my doorbell camera, time-stamped, undeniable. Karen's voice filled the room, "You people don't know when to stop." Then came the image of her raising the hammer. The hit. Lily's scream. The silence that followed was suffocating. Every neighbor froze, hands covering mouths, eyes wide, as the sound of my daughter crying echoed through the speakers. Karen shot to her feet. "Turn that off," she barked, her composure cracking. "That video is illegal. It's taken out of context." I met her eyes. The only context that matters is a child being attacked in her own yard. The murmurs grew into outrage. Mrs. Patel stood, voice trembling. "You told us it was an accident." Another man, Mr. Haynes, added, "You said the girl rolled into you." Karen stammered, her mask crumbling. It was an accident. You all know how these people," she caught herself, "too late." Gasps rippled across the room. I slid another page onto the table, signed statements, time-stamped reports, and her forged, incident summary. "You didn't just hurt my daughter," I said quietly. "You tried to erase what you did." Someone in the back shouted, "Call the cops." The crowd erupted, whispers, phones recording, flashes going off. Karen's face drained of color as two officers entered the doorway, one of them Detective Ramirez. "Karen Lancaster," he said firmly. "You're under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon and falsifying evidence." Her clipboard clattered to the floor. "This is ridiculous," she cried, but the cuffs clicked anyway. The same neighbors who once stayed silent now parted like a tide, watching as she was led away. I stood there, heart pounding, every ounce of grief and fury finally breaking through as something like release. Ramirez turned to me, gave a small nod, and whispered, "You did it right, Mark. By the book." When the room emptied, the projector screen still showed the frozen frame, Karen mid-swing, hammer blurred, my daughter's wheelchair in the corner. For the first time in months, I exhaled without shaking. The truth wasn't just out. It was loud. And in that moment, Maplewood Estates finally saw who their queen really was, and who we had always been, the family she could never silence. The courthouse smelled like polished wood and stale air, that distinct mix of old justice and nervous sweat. A week had passed since Karen's arrest, but the tension hadn't lifted. Every local paper had run the story: HOA president charged in assault on disabled child. News vans parked at the entrance, cameras waiting for her morning walk of shame. Emily held my hand as we walked in, our daughter's wheelchair gliding quietly beside us. Lily was improving, but every push of the wheels reminded me of what had been taken, the effortless joy she used to have. Inside, Karen stood near the defense table, pale but defiant, wearing the same yellow blazer as if trying to remind everyone who she used to be. Her lawyer whispered furiously, but Karen's eyes stayed locked on me. Not remorseful, resentful. That same venom behind her perfectly lined lips. She still thought she could talk her way out of it. When the judge entered, the room stilled. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Ramirez sat a few rows behind me, arms crossed. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Delaney, rose first. Your Honor, the evidence presented leaves no doubt. The video clearly shows the defendant initiating the assault. The victim, an 8-year-old girl with cerebral palsy, posed no threat. This was not an accident, it was aggression, motivated by bias and obsession. Her voice was steady, surgical. Karen's lawyer countered with rehearsed nonsense about a tragic misunderstanding, community stress, and a lapse in judgment. But then Delaney played the footage again, this time frame by frame. The hammer, the swing, the impact, Lily's cry. Gasps filled the courtroom. When it was my turn to speak, the judge gave me a nod. I stood, heart pounding, and walked to the front. Lily's voice echoed faintly in my head, Daddy, am I in trouble? I looked straight at Karen. My daughter will spend the rest of her life remembering what you did, I said quietly. And so will I. You called her noise. You called her a disturbance. But she was the kindest soul on that street, and all she ever did was smile at you. You took that smile away because you couldn't stand to see something you couldn't control. Karen looked away, blinking hard, but I didn't stop. You ruled that neighborhood like a throne room. You made good people afraid. You taught them that silence was safer than decency. But not anymore. Today, everyone here sees you for what you are, not a president, not a leader, just a coward with a hammer. The judge's gavel came down softly. That's enough, Mr. Collins. But her eyes flicked toward Karen with something colder, understanding. The verdict came shortly after, guilty on assault with a deadly weapon, falsification of documents, and obstruction of justice. The words hit like thunder, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Karen's mask cracked completely. She screamed, "You can't do this to me. I am Maplewood Estates. I made that community." The bailiff stepped forward as she thrashed, but her voice kept rising. They all wanted me gone anyway. They're jealous. He planted that video. I stepped back beside Emily and Lily as Karen was restrained. The neighbors who'd once looked away now whispered her name like a ghost story. The same woman who'd once judged every blade of grass on our lawn now sobbed into her cuffed hands. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, lights flashing like lightning. "Mr. Collins, do you have a statement?" one shouted. I paused, looked into the cameras, and said simply, "Justice isn't revenge. It's protection. And I hope no one else's child has to bleed for someone else's ego." Lily smiled faintly from her wheelchair, clutching her therapy bear. Emily squeezed my shoulder, tears streaming silently down her cheeks, this time from relief. Ramirez walked up, handed me his card again. "The DA's pushing for the maximum sentence," he said. 2 years minimum, plus restitution for medical costs. He hesitated. "You did everything right, Mark. Most people snap. You built a case instead." I looked back at the courthouse doors, where Karen was being loaded into the transport van, her yellow blazer wrinkled, hair disheveled, screaming about her community. For the first time, I felt nothing. No rage, no satisfaction. Just closure. As we drove home, the sun dipped behind the roofs of Maplewood Estates. The "For Sale" sign on Karen's lawn tilted in the wind, its edges frayed. Neighbors stood in their driveways, some waved softly, others mouthed apologies. For once, I didn't care who was watching. I parked the car, lifted Lily gently from her wheelchair, and carried her up the ramp Karen once tried to destroy. At the top, she looked at me and whispered, "Daddy, can I paint again tomorrow?" My throat tightened. "Yeah, sweetheart," I said, voice cracking. "You can paint as loud as you want." That evening, as the wind chimes swayed on our porch and Lily's laughter returned to the air, I realized something profound: justice isn't just about punishment. It's about reclaiming peace, one swing, one truth, one voice at a time. For weeks after the verdict, Maplewood Estates felt like a different world, quieter, but not the kind of quiet Karen demanded. This quiet was soft, almost reverent, the kind that follows a storm finally spent. Her yellow house sat dark and hollow now, blinds drawn, porch light flickering. Someone had ripped the HOA president sign off the clubhouse door. The board dissolved within days of her sentencing, and the county stepped in to restructure the association. New rules were written, ones that protected, not punished. For the first time in years, neighbors gathered on lawns again, talking openly about the things they used to whisper. The same people who'd turned their backs began showing up at our doorstep. Mrs. Patel brought casseroles and guilt in her eyes. Mr. Haynes apologized for not coming forward sooner, saying he'd been afraid of losing his job. Karen had connections at the bank where he worked. Even the Patterson couple, who once called us trouble, came to help rebuild the ramp rail that had splintered during the attack. It was surreal, watching them hammer and paint beside Lily as she laughed softly, directing them like a tiny foreman. "Make it blue," she said, and they did. But forgiveness wasn't automatic. Every face reminded me of how alone we'd been when it mattered most. I wanted to hate them, yet something in Lily's innocence disarmed me. She didn't hold grudges, she didn't even remember half the cruelty. All she cared about was that people were smiling again, that the air no longer felt heavy. Watching her laugh with the same neighbors who once avoided her made me realize, maybe this wasn't about erasing what happened. It was about transforming it. The local news called it the Maplewood Reform. Our story inspired statewide HOA policy changes, new oversight, accessibility requirements, anti-discrimination clauses. It didn't erase the pain, but it built something good out of it. And in a strange way, that felt like a victory Lily had earned. At night, when the world quieted and the porch lights flickered on, I'd sit by the window with Emily. Sometimes, neither of us spoke. We'd just listen, to the sound of Lily's soft humming, to the rustle of trees, to the wind chimes Karen once called too noisy. The sound used to annoy her, now, it felt like freedom. I still dream about that day sometimes, the hammer, the scream, the blue paint on the pavement. Trauma doesn't vanish, it reshapes you. But when I look at my daughter, her determination, her laughter, her courage, I see something stronger than vengeance. I see survival. Justice gave us closure. Lily gave us peace. And Maplewood, for all its scars, finally became what it was supposed to be, a community that learned how to listen. Spring came back to Maplewood like a long, gentle apology. The air was warmer, the trees fuller, and for the first time in nearly a year, laughter filled our porch again. Lily's recovery was slow but miraculous. The doctors said she might never regain full strength, yet day by day she defied them, pushing her wheelchair less, standing longer, painting more. Each step she took was small, trembling, but it felt like watching sunlight break through a storm. Her first full day walking across the ramp she'd once been thrown from, she turned to me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "See, Daddy? I told you I'd get back up." The house across the street, Karen's old fortress of arrogance, stood empty now. The for sale sign leaned crookedly in the overgrown grass, and sometimes the wind would knock it down entirely. No one in the neighborhood dared to fix it. It was as if the street wanted to erase her, to let nature reclaim what hate had built. Still, I didn't hate that house. It reminded me of something bigger, that evil doesn't vanish when exposed, it withers when ignored, when no one feeds it with silence or fear. Emily started a small foundation in Lily's name, the Blue Ramp Project. With donations from neighbors and strangers across the state, we helped other families with disabled children build safe, accessible spaces without fighting bureaucracy or cruel people with clipboards. Watching Lily cut the ribbon at the first project dedication made every sleepless night worth it. She smiled for the cameras, sunlight bouncing off her braces, blue paint smudged on her palms, the same color she'd once used to paint our railing. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, we sat together on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the twilight. The wind chimes tinkled softly, and the ramp gleamed freshly painted, bright blue, strong, unbreakable. Lily leaned her head against my arm and said, "It's quiet, Daddy." I smiled. "The good kind of quiet," I told her. Across the street, Karen's house was dark, its windows reflecting the last orange light of day. To me, it no longer symbolized pain. It stood as a warning of what happens when control replaces compassion, when rules matter more than people. I took Lily's hand and squeezed it gently. "You know," I said, "some people spend their lives trying to build fences. Others build ramps." She grinned, that same fearless smile I thought I'd lost forever. And as the wind rustled through our blue-painted ramp and laughter echoed softly through the street, I realized our story's legacy wasn't revenge. It was rebuilding, louder, kinder, and stronger than before.